Now I'm gonna be removing even more wires. Right here you can see the cluster wires. I mean, I'm not gonna have any cluster in the car. I'm gonna be running custom Raspberry Pi for the dash, and also I'm running the Megaskirt. So I use Tuner Studio for tuning the car, so I can make it run on the Raspberry Pi. I'm gonna be also showing you guys how to set it up, how to make it work in the car, wire everything up. Also, as you can see on my wiring, I always use butt connectors. I don't use solder at all for the car, since the car is gonna have a lot of vibration from the solid bushings that are gonna be running on the car, and solder is more brittle. It might eventually give you some problems. It's hard to track and just all that crap. So I'm gonna be removing a lot of wires. I'm not gonna have these connectors anymore that run to the back of the car. Everything is gonna be custom. And also, I'm gonna put it right here. I have the wiring diagram for the Nissan. You can find pretty much all the wiring diagrams for cars like RX-7 or E30, E36, E46 to make it to work. And I'm using it to just give me an idea how to make the car start, for the wipers, for the turning signals, for the headlights, and that's pretty much it. If you're doing something like this, I would suggest to split the wiring harness into as many pieces as you can. Just make it as small as possible so it's easier to work on. For example, right here, also get as organized as possible. When you're removing the wiring harness from your car, mark everything. I used the masking tape right here to mark everything. It's gonna make your life easier on the long run. So mark everything as you remove each wire, and it's gonna be easier for you. Here is the turning signal and hazard warning lamps. Here is the connector for it. Here's the connector for it. I popped the plastic off, took the connector apart, basically took out the wires that I'm not gonna be using, like you can see right here, 8 and 7, and right here it's gonna say which wires are 8 and 7. I removed them because I'm not gonna be using them. So yeah, as you can see, the wiring harness, and then I have another one right here. Like I said, split it as many parts as you can, and it's gonna be easier to work on it. Alright, so I would like to share some tips with you guys on wiring up your drift car or any other car. I mean, if you guys working on some classics and stuff like that, it might help you as well. First thing I do is, my dad taught me that, and on the connector with the solder iron, I use it for the dots. So for each cylinder, for let's just say this one is number 1, so I just put 1 dot. Number 2, number 3. So it helps me out, keeps everything organized. Another thing I do, I always use butt connectors, or I use crimping over soldering. I don't use solder at all, like I was saying before. It's more brittle, it's gonna crack on you, might give you some problems. I just don't recommend it for for splicing. Let's just say 3 wires into 1. These are the step down connectors, which are helpful. You can just put like 22 gauge wire on one end, and then put like 3 wires, 22 gauge wires on the other end, and you have a splice of 1 wire into 3. Another thing is, I use the wire I use is TXL high temperature wire. Especially in the engine compartment, might be a good thing to use a really good wire that keeps up with the heat and everything. If you use crappy wire, you might have some problems later on down the road. So I would recommend using the TXL high temperature wire or some mil-spec wire. All depends, but use some quality wire when doing this stuff. Also, here is that's how it starts. Basically, I lay everything in the on the engine bay, and then basically becomes something like this. And you can see all new terminals, all new seals. That's how I like to do it. I don't like to use any splicing, anything like that. Down the I like to have it from point A to point B, to have one side to have terminal solid wire going to the other terminal that connects to the connector, and that's it. Sometimes, of course, right here, like I have the old circuit for the wipers. I've I've used some butt connectors, which I gonna seal right here. You can see I gotta make sure everything is running good, and then I gotta put some heat shrink on it. Gonna shrink it, secure it, make sure everything is fine. Another thing I like to do is put these clear shrink tubes with printed out labels for the wires. I mean, it just helps everything out, makes it look clean, makes it look professional, and then I know which connector is going where. Another thing is I like to use when when you have an old wiring, it's always some crappy insulation on there and stuff like that, electrical tape. Like what I like to use right here is a roofing knife, basically with the hook. So when you have it right here, you can always see. You're not gonna you gotta be really careful, of course, but you can pretty much see the electrical tape. When you're cutting it, it helps you and saves time. Also, another thing is invest in some good wire strippers. These are the Ideal Strip Masters. These are pretty much professional for mil-spec wire and everything. So just invest in something good. This one is like, what, I don't know, $50, which is not too bad. Also, another thing is for the connectors, when I take them apart, I use the from TIG welding. I use the tungsten, which I sharp, and I just lift up the tabs on the connectors when I take them apart. And also, when you're working with the wiring harness, it's important to really write everything down. Here are my notes for the, let's just say, wipers right here. Every connector, I highlight everything, make sure everything is clean, and you know what you're doing when you're having every wire labeled. Then you know which one's going where. When you're cutting stuff, just write it down, organize it as best as you can. Put all the notes, write as much as you can, and then it's gonna definitely use. Sometimes you might think, oh, I remember this wire's going here and this wire's going there, or I remember I did this and did that. No, you're gonna forget, and down the road you're gonna end up with the circuit that is not working at all, and you have everything in the car and just wasting your time. So like I said right here, I put everything, highlighted everything. The wires I'm not gonna be using is just I circle them and then throw them out. I take the connector apart, I throw them out. Okay, so another thing is when you're building the circuits right here for coils or injectors or for the ECU, always make sure when you're doing the 12 volt, you're gonna plug it to the on start, that it's gonna give power on start. When I was wiring the car for the first time, I made the mistake and I made the power wires for the coils and injectors not to have power on start. So when I was trying to start the car, I was just cutting the power to the injectors and coils, and it was not starting, and I was trying to figure everything out, and just giving me problems. So always remember, when you're doing some custom stuff, always make sure these wires are connected to the relay that is giving giving power on start, which is really important. Yeah, so here's the wiring. When I start doing the wiring, I start with the connector. I crimp everything. Always leave the wires longer. It's gonna help you down the road. And then I route it, whichever way is gonna be the best for me. And then I always leave some extra 6 inches of wire, which is gonna help me if I change the route, or I end up relocating the connector inside, anything like that. Always leave a little more extra wire.